show here in Los Angeles, because I've only gotten to see your other solo shows through the internet.
I know, it's kind of weird. It's so weird to be in
So yeah, we're going to talk about sleeves, and Seffa made kind of an incredible print. What do you call it?
So I've been calling it an afterword. It's an afterword to the show, and it's like a little booklet that I made, and it's just a journey to figure out how it works. So, but there's 12 pages of writing that kind of goes between theory and practice and materials and different forms of logic, and we're going to go through some of the ideas that are in here, and also just see what else emerges between the two of us. But you're all welcome to take one if you're interested in exploring.
So yeah, I wanted to approach this conversation as sort of a cross between a formal conversation about the show itself and your practice, and then just a normal conversation between the two of us. But I want to start with materiality, because you've been working with bismuth for a long time, but you started with gallium.
Mm-hmm.
And so you talk about your attraction to different metals having to do with their cosmic origins and also their molecular properties. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about gallium and its sort of divine feminine power, and then about bismuth.
So I first kind of stumbled across this metal called gallium, and it melts at human body temperature. Like, it actually melts at 86 degrees, so a little below human body temperature, but it can be solid, and then you hold it in your hand and it melts. So it's like mercury, but it's non-toxic, and they actually use it for certain body scans. Like, they'll inject it into your blood to make things visible. So it's very safe for the human body, but it's also liquid like mercury. And I thought it was so beautiful to watch something that looks so solid and structural, a metal that we think of as kind of like a masculine structural element, melting in your hand and becoming something that feels almost like a little kind of living being. Like, it becomes warm, and it's like it kind of moves around, and it feels like a little, I don't know, creature, and it feels very feminine. And then I discovered that it has this ability to seep into other metals and destroy the structural integrity of the metal. So it actually breaks down the molecular bonds of that metal. So it maintains its form, but the bonds are broken, and then it can just be crumbled. So I was using it on like aluminum ladders and different aluminum objects, and allowing it to like seep in and then just be able to kind of crumble these strong things with my hand, just like. And I loved that it was this kind of what I thought to be a feminine way of exhibiting force, or like a feminine kind of power, where it wasn't like a brute force of like, I have the strength to break this metal. It was like this, I use this element that has the ability to kind of break it down from the inside, and it's just kind of this secret like quiet power, which I feel kind of connects to this idea of like the Tao Te Ching kind of dark enigma, or the feminine force, and its kind of quiet ability to just hold all of the power of the ocean, you know?
Yeah, I really love that ladder piece. Where is that these days? That was one of the first things that I saw in your studio, because each rung is sort of broken down the middle, and it looks like you can see that you clearly just kind of crumbled it, but it's so mysterious, and it feels...
Yeah, you can just like break little pieces apart.
Yeah.
It's in storage.
Somebody should acquire that. But what's interesting about it, that you stopped working with gallium kind of because it makes it very difficult to actually keep a piece stable.
Yeah, it's like something to circle back on when I have maybe different, I don't know, circumstances. Like it doesn't, as a working emerging artist, like collectors don't want like a painting that's gonna melt onto the floor. Is what I learned. So anyways, I started that when I was like 20, and by the time I was like, 23, I was like, I think we're gonna just stick with the bismuth for now. But for a while I had like the two of both of them on the canvas, and I really loved the tension between the two of them conceptually. And then I had this whole process called like dewing, where I would give people like a little dropper and be like, well, if it gets too warm in your house, you have to basically take this little dropper and like take the gallium off of the piece, which is cool. And obviously it's like a non-toxic metal, it wasn't really causing harm, but I think it was just like, it became a little bit more fussy than I would like my work to be, like, you know.
So high maintenance.
Yeah, it was a bit high maintenance. It depends on the collector, you know. Could be fun for somebody who wants like a ritual.
Yeah, that's true.
Or who lives somewhere cold.
I mean, the people who got that banana have to replace that banana with duct tape, and how frequently? That's a lot of work.
I don't know, I thought someone just ate it and it was done. Or does it exist?
It's a performance essentially.
Right.
So you just keep recasting the banana and the tape.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I was also like, I don't want to travel around the world like repainting gallium onto paintings. At the moment, that's not my desire.
yeah.
Anyways.
Okay, so you.
So then I also wanted to actually find something, like when I was first using only gallium, I was doing it on glass and I couldn't really scale it up. Pieces were breaking. I was making these mirrors using this process called wetting, which is like a molecular process that they used for making silver mirrors back in the day, but I could do it at a low temperature with just a hair dryer to like warm it up. So it was really fun making these kind of multi-layered mirrors, but I couldn't scale it up. It was hard to create pieces that could be transported without breaking, and there was no color also. And mixing it with paint just didn't feel right. So when I found bismuth, I was hesitant first, but I started experimenting with it, and once I landed on a few different techniques, it just really took off, and I really fell in love with the metal. And as soon as I started using it, you know, it became less of a like, oh, it's more practical than gallium, and more of a love affair. Like, I really loved the properties of the metal, and it just, there was a sense of like, I'm doing the right thing when I'm using this metal. Yeah.
Can you talk about some of these stellar origins of bismuth? Because that's a huge part of your attraction to it.
So it's created along with the other heavier elements. It's created in the highest energy events in the universe, which are collisions between neutron stars. Not even a supernova is actually powerful enough to create metals that are this heavy. So it's these collisions between neutron stars that are collisions that result in black holes being formed. It's hard to even comprehend how much energy that is, but I really love the idea that this magical metal has like touched the most kind of profound cataclysmic events in the universe, and somehow holds that intelligence in its own logic, the logic of its formation.
And you can pull 7 different colors out of it through oxidation processes. So you're applying the metal, and then you have this oxidation process. And it's, how exactly are you pulling these colors out, and what does that look like when you're making the work?
So when I first apply it, it looks silver like this, and then all the areas where you see color, I've done this controlled oxidation process that I've developed over the past decade, and it's basically like an electrochemical process in which through heat and time, I'm able to control a nanostructure being formed on the surface. As the surface is losing electrons through the process, it's creating like this tiny nanoscale mountain range that changes shape and then refracts light differently. And so instead of a pigment which absorbs some light waves and then reflects other light waves, refractive color does not have an absolute value. It's refracting all of the light waves back, and the waves are either combining or canceling out. So the lighting is always, or the color of the work is always changing depending on its environment. And yeah, and then he's going to turn off the lights. You'll see how much the work changes with different lighting.
Wow.
And I really like that the work is not existing independently of its environment. It's really an emergence. And it has to do with where you're standing, the light of the room, and the structure the nanostructure on the surface of the metal, and I really like that dance is always happening, and there's never a disconnect.
Well, I want to now shift from just the overall practice as a whole to this show, which is titled Sleeves, and this concept that you're invoking with the sleeve as both a boundary, but also a generative condition.
So yeah, these works, the form of these works kind of emerged from this idea, this consideration of the idea of flow as an organizing principle in reality. And so if you think about kind of the origins of life or of structure, starting with kind of nothingness in space, the very first things that emerged happened because of organizational difference and flow that occurred between them. So there's a positive here and a negative here, and the two want to equalize, so they create flow. And those systems of flow have become more and more complex, up to the scale of kind of the complexity of the human body and cells. And you know, every cell has these phospholipid bilayers that are able to produce energy and movement and motion and filtration. And these systems are all systems of flow and differential gradients. And then you can look at like economics and like populations and all the ways in which larger scales of organization also can be looked at through this lens of flow. And then I also think about the idea of like a development of one's sense of self.
Right, you talk about the boundary of the self and the relationship to matter and energy is the birth of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, can you talk about that, about this idea of boundary and perspective?
Yeah. So I thought of these as like paintings of flow, and then I thought of them as sleeves, which is the title of the show, because I realized that I wanted them to be portraits of like a human body in some way or another. And I was kind of an act of faith creating these paintings. I didn't quite know how it was that they were portraits, but I knew that like the kind of proportion of the canvas was related to the human body and everything. And then I started seeing them as arms, like shoulders and sleeves. And when I realized that, I realized like, oh, a sleeve is like something that you reach through out as you like kind of pass out into the world to create action. And what is that? That's a perspective. It's kind of this system of logic that we inhabit. And I think in the quote that you mentioned from the writing, like it's this idea, a perspective is an acknowledgement of your own limitation. Like perspective doesn't exist independently of the fact that there's separation between you and your environment. So it's kind of this acknowledgement that I'm an individual in this position and I'm in this certain place, these certain surroundings, and sort of saying I'm not omniscient. Like I'm existing, I have this perspective that I'm in this position and I see things in this certain way. And so it's acknowledgement not only of the way you see things, but of the things that you don't see. And it's acknowledgement of like a projection of reality. And when I say projection, you can think of like map projection or like, data manipulation. Like a perspective is not reality itself, it's inhabited being and like projected reality basically.
It's sort of like, what is that parable of like the blind man and the elephant? Or blind men, they're all feeling different parts of the elephant, trying to describe them to each other, but like from this singular perspective, these little details that you're getting are not giving you really much of an idea of the whole.
Right. So then I like the idea of perspective as a garment, because if you kind of separate yourself from your perspective, it can be more fun. You can like be like, well, this is my perspective, but it's not me. And I'm really interested back in the dark and back we're just talking about like these things, these paradoxes that allow us like logical systems or perspectival systems to break down. And at that point, you're confronted with the difference between you and the system that you've been running, basically. And I think that's this really beautiful projective space where you can say like, well, I'm not my perspective. Maybe I'll try a new perspective. And in a time when like we're so ill-equipped to kind of deal with what the world is, like I don't feel that we've done enough work on consciousness to like inhabit the world as we know it. And so this idea of like a perspective as a garment that you can like try different ones on is this kind of beautiful, to me, like a sort of a beautiful metaphor of like flow and trying new things.
Well, in this idea of consciousness, you talk about the boundary of consciousness. Is this like a term you're coining?
No,
in a sense,
it's
or?
not. It's like a known term.
Okay. But you're relating it to this binding problem in theories of consciousness. Can you talk about that?
Oh, that's, yeah, the other
The
thing is
binding
actually kind of
problem.
my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, the binding problem is real. So a lot of theories of consciousness have this question called the binding problem of why, like for instance, in a panpsychist theory of consciousness, some people believe that all things have consciousness to different degrees. So even like a pebble has some consciousness, but a human might have more consciousness just based on that kind of a higher system of organization leading to that. But if you think of it in that way, then the question emerges, well, why are we individuals then? What makes, where do we end and where does something else begin? Like, why is my consciousness not connected to everything else? Why am I not partially summer right now? I might argue that I am, in fact. That we are actually connected and we're just not, like it's not maybe evolutionarily useful for us to perceive all of that information. But that's kind of the question, is why do we experience life as this binded, limited thing where we are individuals separate from everything else?
Can you talk about the distinction between perspective and reality as it relates to that boundary of self?
Yeah, I think I always see my practice as like, part of what's in the text is that I kind of see my practice as like the development of a technology. Like the artwork is almost this technology through which I'm able to like become closer to reality. And I really like this idea of reality as this kind of like asymptotic thing that I'm always trying to move towards. And that like the boundary of my human condition will never allow me to get there, but that the act of like constantly becoming closer is like the highest form of living that I feel that I can take. And so it also connects to this idea of like becoming. Like I was saying these are portraits of becoming. And the idea of becoming is not that you arrive, it's that you're constantly present for whatever is happening in the moment. Because reality is constantly kind of like new and regenerating, and there's really, I think whatever we carry with us from one moment to the next should be useful. And so I like thinking about life that way, because I think evolutionarily we're programmed to take things that are painful or like gonna help us with survival, and it's not always what's actually useful for us to become closer to reality and to advance our consciousness. And so it's kind of this active thing of how do I turn my art practice into something that helps me only kind of take these useful ideas and useful things with me into the next moment and allow me to kind of become closer to this state of becoming that I feel like is closer to reality. And it's the perspective as the garment is about being able to take it off also. Like that this boundary of self is also an illusion, and that we are not the boundary, but we are the thing that flows through it, and that we can kind of there's malleability in our sense of self, and that
It's like we're always
don't have
going to have some form of tunnel vision, but we can switch the perspective through which we look through that tunnel and constantly get a little bit of a sense of the bigger picture. Because when you poke like
the more we switch,
1,000
the better.
holes into the page, so you can see through it a lot better than just through one.
Yeah, like I feel like getting caught, like identifying with the perspective is a little bit old school. Like, why? I always thought it was weird to have like strong opinions, because like an opinion is only like it's an instance of comprehension, but it's not. Why is that your identity? Like, there's just maybe it's a time, it comes from an older time, like when there was less information and you could really latch onto things, but I now feel that like every moment is new ground, like, and you know, what we need is not a bunch of opinions, but tools through which we can actively be processing all of this new information and making good decisions about where we stand in every moment. And that comes from like a deep sense of like a deep technological sense of being, like a deep sense of, I have these tools and I know how to use them, not like I have these answers memorized, you know? So that's why I like to think of like art practice as a technology, or a technology that has the result of developing intelligence, because I don't think that anything is memorizable anymore. And I find that all these structures are kind of crumbling, and the thing I'm left with is my own ability to be inventive and imaginative, and that seems to be the thing, the through line for me, where everything else kind of is in flux.
We'll talk about musical inspirations and take like a total non sequitur. But
Okay.
there's two pieces that have like very specific musical inspirations. The first is Decorated.
That one over there.
Yeah. I think this is my favorite piece of the show. And this one, you were endlessly listening to Mozart's Symphony 25.
Yeah, it was like a little unhinged. I don't know what was going on, but I just kept listening to the symphony, and it's so dramatic. It's really like, starts out, I think it sounds like an existential breakdown, which I love, big fan. I think we should be, I mean, I would like to normalize existential breakdowns. Like, why are we not? This is so weird, you guys. But anyway, so I was into that, but then suddenly in the middle, it's sort of like, it just sort of becomes like, I was picturing like old like fashion people in a little ballroom or something. It's sort of like this patriotic frivolity, and like, it feels very civil. And I thought it was so weird, like the structure of this, and you know, maybe it's because I'm not from that time, but to me it felt like, you know, the first sort of key part was him expressing himself honestly, and it was very subjective, and then the second part feels like this kind of connection to objective reality and taste, and like, to me it felt like almost this decoration of the piece that allowed people to have entrance into it and relate to it. And then, you know, he got them in there, they're in the ballroom, and then throws them back into the existential crisis. And he was like 17 when he made this piece, so I'm like, this is accurate. Because I feel like when you're 17, you're so tapped in to like the universe, you know? But also maybe he was trying to, you know, make his work acceptable in some way, and kind of have this segue into something that was more radical. And then I was just, you know, listening to that. I made this piece at that time, and
There's the double entendre of the title too.
Mhm.
You talk about the double entendre of Decorated.
yeah, so I was thinking about this idea of decoration and decorating something in prettiness and all of those ideas, and then decorated as like the act of receiving an honor, like becoming decorated, or actually we met.
But it was just, we met at a naming ceremony for a friend.
One of my many wonderfully special friend meeting stories.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that kind of relates interestingly to this idea that you have of what you call the great attractor, and this sense of worth, this sense of reason for being that we're all born with, and the way that we have this idea that we have to prove ourselves, that we have to achieve certain things in order to have an identity or one's life to be worthwhile. But you talk about this great attractor.
Yeah. Yeah, in the text I have this passage where I'm talking about how in society we're kind of made to believe that we're empty, and we need to kind of be filled by the world or impress something onto the world to be remembered. But it's kind of this flawed logic, and that in reality my experience of having the consciousness is that there's we all have these kind of attractors, which is a reference to the idea of a strange attractor, which is a concept in chaos theory. It's a mathematical concept, but it essentially means in math, it's like an attractor is something where whatever the input is, you don't know what the output's going to be, but it's kind of going to wind around this thing. So it's almost like a kind of gravity, in a metaphorical sense, not a literal sense. But I really feel like everybody, if you look back at your life, like you can see so much about who you are from your interests when you were 2 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old. And I still look back at the things I made when I was a kid, and they're so clearly connected to the things I'm making today. And I think everybody has that. And then if we kind of take away our ideas about how we're supposed to kind of build ourselves, our identities up in the world, this kind of like identity production, and instead sort of just be like, well, what if you actually just let go of the idea of the identity whatsoever, and you kind of don't worry about having an identity or opinions or a personality, turns out you do actually just have all those things naturally by just sort of like, and so I think there's this fear, like, I need to be good enough, or like be interesting enough, or I need to put on these kind of, like, I need to wear these behaviors and do things in a certain way, but it's just not useful anymore. You know, the more interesting thing is kind of finding that source of gravity that you're born with, and like just sticking with that.
Right.
Like the world isn't like whatever's going on isn't working anyways, like clearly. So my proposition is like, stop trying to function within that, and instead invent something new for yourself. And it connects also to this idea that maybe we can go into about like art practice as, I said, like an incorruptible religion.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because you talk about spirituality as a technology, but also an art practice as a technology, and this difference between the two being that the art practice can be sort of incorruptible, whereas religion always is.
Yeah, and I've been kind of coming back around to this idea that it's going to be so important for people to just be given the tools to ask the question of, what is my practice? And that could be, and it connects to this idea of flow in the terms of a flow state as well. Everyone has something that gets them into a flow state. It could be exercise, it could be cooking, it could be art, or it could be looking at art. You know, but everybody has something that gets them into a space that feels, they feel closer to reality, because in that state, your identity actually kind of gets out of the way, and you can perceive things more accurately without having this kind of, you know, swimming of your attachments.
Right.
And I think, yeah, the art practice is a way, or an equivalent of an art practice, is a way for somebody to develop a system for themselves, to be devoted to something, and to create a system of meaning and belief and faith and habit, but not based on what anybody else like says is right, but what really feels right to you. And it's just a matter of like being given the tools to know that you're allowed to ask those questions and to do that. Because I think as soon as you ask a question, like answers are everywhere. That's what my work's been about a lot, is just like this idea of access. Like we have a lot of access actually, but we don't have the questions. Yeah.
Well, going back to this idea of like it being innately born, we're born with this, and then it just sort of expresses itself if we just allow it to. You know, we were talking about this the other day, and then I was playing with Maurice, my son, who's almost 3, and he's playing the harmonica, and so I'm like sort of secretly filming him, and he just kind of like breathes in and out of it for a little bit, and then he starts kind of like going back and forth, and then he stops, and I don't know what he's doing. It almost sounds like he's kind of beatboxing. He's like, and then he goes back, and then he really plays it, and he sees that I'm filming him, and he's like, let me see. So I let him see it, and he starts really smiling when he sees himself doing this little beatbox. And then he repeats it, but then he's going, bunny, cookie, and it like, he decides in that moment that's what he's saying. I don't think he is, the first time. He doesn't really know what's coming out. And then he's like, let's do it again, and he starts playing a song he wants me to film him, and then he's really pronouncing bunny, cookie. And we finish that, and we go, and he's into it. I go to make lunch, and he kind of is singing it to himself. And I said, yeah, I really love this bunny cookie song. He's like, it's not a song, Mom, it's a walk. And I was like, what do you mean it's a walk? And he starts hopping up and down, saying, bunny, cookie. And it's this thing that's just living through him, that he's just creating. He's like, it's,
Oh my God,
there's
I love that
no
so
active,
like there's no words.
there's no words,
Yeah.
there's no process where he's thinking, I'm gonna make up a song, I'm gonna make up a dance. It's coming out in multiple media in all these different ways, and it's evolving in this very natural sense because he's just allowing it to, because the space was just there for it. And that's the sleeve that creates the flow.
I love that. That's so good. Yes, exactly. Kids are so connected to that fear, and I feel like as we move through society, and I think it has a lot to do with fear and like trying to belong and trying to survive, but we kind of lose that freedom.
Right.
And that's kind of the magic of like those years up until maybe when you're like 20 years old, that you have like this kind of supernatural thing going on. And I think you can preserve it for longer than that, though. I think that's what artists do. But a lot of people lose it at that point.
Yeah, and so your practice is really about trying to integrate reality into intelligence. And
Yeah,
can you,
exactly.
that's kind of the last thing I want to leave us on, that maybe you can talk about before I'll open it up for anybody that might want to ask you questions.
Yeah. What I'll say to that is that I sort of see everything as information, and I see our kind of reason for being, or our maybe most productive purpose for being, as developing our intelligence. And intelligence is not smartness or like book smartness or something. It's like the ability to integrate reality into a system that becomes increasingly capable of further integrating reality and further producing new ideas and further evolving reality also. We're like coexisting with what's here, and I want to become close to it and to like co-author the next the next forms of consciousness that we're all going to inhabit together, and I think we all have a way more active role in that than we realize. Like, it's all of our ideas and ways of being they feel sort of implicit, but they're kind of not. Like, we actually can make pretty big changes pretty quickly if we just have those questions. And I don't know if that.
And are you looking at this through like a materialist perspective or like a quantum perspective?
I think I'm more of a panpsychist, if you mean like in the terms of like materialist versus kind of panpsychist perspectives. But I don't know what you would describe like Karen Barat as, but I really love her like theory of agential realism. It's an ontology that she has. It's all about the interaction between things, and like that we're not existing independently of everything else. That reality is constantly like being generated and co-created through interactions. I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it, and that is like quantum. She's actually a quantum physicist, but I think it's this idea that we can't really do anything except for advance our own intelligence, and the act of doing it, that actually has a butterfly effect. It's very positive in every way. If we change the way that we think about things, it changes our actions, and it changes the entire structure of the world. So that's always just been my interest. Is this idea of why we are the way we are, and how we can find ways that's malleable and change it.
With that, I want to leave it to you guys in case anybody has anything they wanna ask something.
I really appreciate the philosophical roots and intentions of the work, but I have to ask a really simple question, maybe that's as simple
Okay,
as
cool.
the harm.
Yeah.
Can you describe how you make this work, like physically, what it looks like when you make one of these pieces, how you do it?
I'm a little bit secretive about the process. But I do apply it in its molten state. So I'm using bismuth molten. It's 560 degrees when I apply it. And it cools pretty much instantly when it's applied to the canvas. The canvas is made of woven glass, so it's able to withstand 1200 degrees, because if I was just using a normal canvas, it would be burned immediately. And so yeah, after applying it, it's silver, and then I'm conducting this controlled oxidation process with heat that allows me to control one of 7 colors, and I can have very precise control. Like in that piece, you can see that I've controlled the color very precisely, whereas in some of the other pieces, I kind of am able to also let go of that control to a certain degree and allow it to emerge more naturally. But yeah, at that point, I'm basically painting with color after I've already applied it, so the color's within the metal.
What led you to, what was the genesis of your interest in exploring the properties of metal and how you can use it in your art? That's first, but there's another thing too, but.
Probably just, I've always been really interested in science. I remember the first time I read about quantum mechanics, I was 15, my dad gave me a book on it and I was reading it, and it's the first time that I read something in science that immediately changed my perception of reality. And in that moment I realized, okay, science is a place where I can read things that actively change everything about the way that I see the world day to day. Like, I probably misunderstood like the measurement problem and stuff, and I definitely thought that it meant that like my eyes are collapsing waves and stuff, which is probably not true, but it doesn't matter because I like the quantum weirdness just broke my mind open and made me, think about life differently. And then I got really, addicted to science and how it can shift your perspective on reality so quickly, because it gets down to the root of the way things operate. And a lot of my perspectives are based on, scientific ideas. And so becoming really close to a basic element just felt so natural. Like, I actually started before Gallium with plaster, which is not a basic element, but it's a pretty historical one. And that was the first time I started using a material that I thought really embodied the ideas that I was interested in. And after that, all of my work was really like using materials that embodied the ideas on a molecular scale and embodied also transformation. Like plaster goes from powder to liquid to solid, and then I was carving into it after that. So it was all this kind of transformation, and then the metals also go from solid liquid to solid. I really like this idea of phase transition and sublimation, because it's these jumps between registers that are not continuous, but they're state changes, and I think it's so interesting.
It's fascinating. And the other thing I just wanted to comment, or I love your comment, I'm just so intrigued by your whole thought process about how your art practice kind of leads to a raised consciousness or something along those lines. I know it's much more than that, but for me, like, I feel like creating something new as an artist out of nothing but an idea or a concept, or it's just the most, if it's not consciousness raising, it's something else. It's what makes it so
deepening,
compelling and fascinating. I just, wanted to know if there's anything else you had to say.
Like kind of about what happens when you're making an artwork.
Yeah, I guess so. And
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of artists share the feeling of like when you're making an artwork, it's almost like you're getting out of the way and allowing something to flow through you. So I feel like it's a connection to reality, because there's an inventiveness, but it almost feels very humble. It feels like a gift that you're being given, and it's so beautiful. I don't know about consciousness raising, just because I avoid those ideas of hierarchy. but I think maybe consciousness becoming better equipped to integrate reality or to have a positive effect on oneself and one's surroundings. Maybe it's the same as saying raising consciousness, I don't know. But I feel like that could become a little bit spiritual bypassy or something, but which I try to avoid. But
Do you feel like you use reality and God interchangeably or synonymously?
yeah, definitely. I use the word God for my close friends, not reality for everybody else. Basically, because I feel like people don't know what I'm
closeted believer in God.
I'm not even closeted. I think it's just I use different words depending on the person, because I think the word God could be really useful to deepen a sense of love for certain people, but then for some people it comes with trauma and it comes with shame and it comes with things that are attached to it that aren't useful. So I don't really hear the word, but I'm definitely connecting to divinity, and that's the main goal. And I think it's easier because people have so many ideas about what that means. People have so many ideas about science and what that means and what the barriers are for entrance, and people have so many ideas about meditation and spirituality and what that means, and religion and what the barriers are for entrance to that. And so I think in the way that I talk about my work, because I'm not really tied to any of those things, I don't have a religion, and I'm into science, but I think of science as poetry, So I kind of avoid words that hold too many preconceived notions, because the whole point is to kind of give people permission to think about things differently and to feel like they're allowed to enter any of these fields and realize that there actually is no prerequisite for connecting to science or to divinity and that all of those things are actually different facets.
Are you trying to pull a Mozart a little bit?
Maybe. There you go. That makes sense. That all those things are different facets of comprehending reality, actually. You could see it through the spiritual perspective, you could see it through scientific perspective. They're all different epistemological frameworks for becoming closer to reality. So I actually think reality is maybe a better word, right? Because it's not about, it's not about any of these structures that already exist. It's about your own personal relationship to your experience and what's true to your experience.
From your previous works, I'm kind of seeing an evolution in terms of you have more geometry and closed fields in prior work. So I'm curious, in this body of work, do you see it as a personal evolution of your consciousness, or kind of opening up the system in terms of your visual language?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. In some of my previous bodies of work, the pieces were much more geometric, and it was really the circle was a symbol for the infinite, and the square was a symbol for the finite, and I was creating these kind of landscapes upon which the eye could travel and sort of feel that there's access to both worlds and that they're interwoven. And so it's kind of this almost architectural, metaphorical, symbolic framework for that idea. And so it was kind of more in the realm of, what am I going to say? I feel like it was more in the realm of epistemology, and maybe these are more in the realm of ontology, which the difference of that is that would be ways of thinking versus ways of knowing versus ways of being. And so to me, these feel a little bit more like they're focused on the act of being. So they're less mental and less about these symbols, and even though I just went into a million philosophical concepts, they're less about philosophical concepts and more about inhabited being. And they totally transformed me too, making them I wanted to have a practice that felt way more kind of open and was allowing me to move through ideas more quickly. And the last two works in the show that are actually in the beginning of the show, to me are really kind of the thing that emerged from these archway pieces, these sleeve pieces, and kind of a lot of freedom. Those ones were more like these energetic signatures that felt to me like representations of what it feels like to be alive. I wanted to find something like that. It's like less symbolic and like, oh, I've got it all figured out, and a little bit more mysterious, like for me.
Yeah.
I love that phrase that you have, that this art is your system of being. And I wondered, I can see certain flow, which obviously is something about consciousness, and I don't want to wander too far semiotic into your work, but could you talk something about the meanings of these artworks?
Like,
How is it that you relate it to consciousness, for instance? That kind of thing.
oh, I see what you mean. So, when I think about the function of these paintings, I don't think about them as like didactic portrayals of a certain idea or concept. I think of them more as like a landscape upon which the eye can travel upon. And I think using something like bismuth metal that is like refracting light and has such a kind of sculptural quality, it really holds attention. So they're more like sites for which you to experience meaning in your own way, connection in your own way. They're supposed to hold, like, my goal is to hold attention. That could be through curiosity, or through awe, or through beauty. And in that space where your attention is held on a form that feels to me kind of, I definitely gravitate towards these forms that feel like they embody universal concepts. And so they're kind of questions.
Maybe you could talk about No Enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
and-
the title of this piece is No Enemy, which I think operates as a question. You're looking at the piece and you see the name No Enemy, and I think the question here is like, what has no enemy? So it's kind of a meditation on this idea of what might exist in the world without enemy. I think that's a beautiful idea, and it actually came from a Fela Kuti song, Water No Get Enemy. I was listening to this podcast around the time that I was making the piece. It was called Fela Kuti, Fear No Man, and it was about his life and legacy, and his mother's life and legacy. Really beautiful story, and I really love that song. It's a beautiful song about how water has no enemy, and that we all share this need of water and this connection through water. And I just love that it was a song written by like one of the most hardcore revolutionaries that's ever lived. And so I named the piece No Enemy, and I just chose that phrase because I think it operates as a question in that way. Yeah. So they're like little prompts, curiosity prompts, and I also think that when I'm making the work, I'm making work that to me feels almost like it embodies a sense of peace and stillness and openness, and it's almost like an arena in which you might be able to just hear your own thoughts a little bit better. So,
yes, sorry, you may have gone over this, but I was a bit late, challenged when talking. They're very beautiful, these pieces, and I was wondering who some of your artistic influences might be, over the centuries. Have you traveled to places that have inspired you, where you've seen art? Just a little bit of background.
I've definitely traveled a lot, spent a lot of time in Europe, and definitely seen a lot of amazing art there. I mean, these are definitely inspired by cathedrals and some of the cathedrals I saw in Europe when I was actually nomadic for a couple of years before I just moved back about a year ago, and spent a lot of time. Whenever I could, I would go into cathedrals and just think, they're so beautiful. And I've always been interested in architecture as well, and referencing architecture because of its ability to influence consciousness, and how like the built environment actually functions in forming our perceptions as well. But yeah, in terms of artists, I mean, I definitely feel, I feel like I'm maybe more influenced by nature and science than like specific artists, but then my whole life is about seeing art, and I'm like completely obsessed. So I'm probably super influenced by everything I see all the time. I'm so inspired. And I have a lot of books of Ken Clint. I I think the way that I operated is different than the way she operated. She was more like a medium, but I really think there's something pure about the way that she was devoted to her practice as like this transmission of information that I really like, and she didn't really care much for, you know, the immediate results of that. It was really pure kind of like devotion to information coming through.
You also come from a family of artists, so
Yeah.
I feel like that's
So they've influenced me a lot.
yeah.
What's the hermetic symbolism of bismuth? I think you told me once, and I'm just curious, has there, I mean, can you just elaborate on a little bit of history of bismuth? Bismuth through metallurgy and
I don't know like all of the alchemical symbology, but I do know that it's been used in like metaphysical traditions, Chinese medicine. It's considered like to aid with lucid dreaming and to have like the properties of aiding with information like being transmitted between dimensions, like in metaphysical traditions. But I don't know all the specifics of all of that. But then it's also used in medicine, like Pepto-Bismol, which literally is a medicine. And it's used in cosmetics. It's used in bullets to make them non-toxic to the environment. But more to answer your question, yeah, it's considered to aid with like dreaming and transmission between dimensions.
in Eastern philosophical systems or just traditions?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into it a little bit more. I know it's also been used in Chinese medicine
Right.
a bit. Yeah, I haven't. Not really a historian on the metal.
Yeah, if there was some sort of Paracelsian logic to it, I'm just curious.
Probably, I should probably do like a more comprehensive research, but all of the kind of all of the research I've done and then partially forgotten definitely made me feel at the time like, yeah, this myth makes a lot of sense. But it would, of anybody, I should probably know all of those facts. But again, I'm not.
You're not a fact
I'm not a
memorizer.
fact memorizer.
I relate to that. Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming.